Hi, everybody. My name is Greg Katz, and welcome to Tuesday's first half kickoff edition of WeAreUSC.com's Inside the Trojans Huddle, where we do tell it like it is. Friends, Inside the Trojans Huddle is a game-like panel discussion that is posted on Tuesdays and Thursdays on WeAreUSC.com and features WeAreUSC columnists, staff writers, and historians. We first start off with the pregame show, where we introduce our panel members for this edition of Inside the Trojans Huddle, and then give you the latest USC Trojans football news. First, let's meet Tuesday's panelists, a WeAreUSC columnist who writes WeAreUSC.com's Monday Morass, Yay or Nay, and Sunday Takeaways, in addition to regular season football and practice reports. He also hosts his own podcast show entitled Locked On USC. That's Marc Kulkin, a former William Jewell College defensive back and WeAreUSC columnist who writes the popular WeAreUSC.com column, Musings with Arledge, and now has his own weekly WeAreUSC.com video show, Musings with Arledge, a graduate of the USC Law School, Chris Arledge. A legendary award-winning Southern California sports columnist, a member of the USC Athletic Hall of Fame and a USC graduate, and author of two widely acclaimed books on USC football, Fight On, the colorful story of USC football, and Always Compete, an inside look at Pete Carroll and the USC football juggernaut. Let's welcome Steve Bisheff. And a weekly WeAreUSC columnist who writes Fridays Obvious and Not So Obvious, IMHO Sunday, and is an active member of the Football Writers Association of America, your moderator and producer of Inside the Trojans Huddle. That's me, Greg Katz. Before we kick off this Tuesday's first half edition, Inside the Trojans Huddle, here's the latest USC football news. The Trojans last Saturday night survived a late run by the Cal Bears to secure a 41-35 victory in the Coliseum. The Pac-12 win allowed the men of Troy, now number 8 in the country at 6-1 in the Pac-12, 8-1 overall, to control their own conference championship destiny with just Colorado on Friday night and at UCLA remaining. Against Cal, Trojans quarterback Caleb Williams passed for 360 yards, 4 touchdowns, ran for another score. Caleb got big assists from sophomore wide receiver Michael Jackson III, who had 5 catches for 155 yards and 2 TD receptions, one a spectacular 59-yard scoring completion and run. And they were also supported by running back Travis Dye, who contributed 98 yards on the ground and had one 12-yard TD scamper. On the negative side, the Trojans defense gave up 406 yards through the air, courtesy of Cal quarterback Jack Plummer, who also threw 3 touchdown passes. It was not a good night for the defense, although the defense gave up just 63 yards rushing. And for the third time this season, Trojans defensive tackle Tuli Tuipulotu was named Pac-12 Defensive Player of the Week for his efforts against Cal. Tuli now leads the nation in sacks with 9. This Friday night at 6:30 p.m. in the Coliseum, the visiting Colorado Buffaloes, 1-5 in the Pac-12, 1-8 overall, come to town to battle the Trojans. The game will be nationally televised on FS1. More on this game on Thursday's Inside the Trojans Huddle. And according to multiple media outlets, the kickoff time for the USC-UCLA game in the Rose Bowl will start at either 5 p.m. on Fox or 7:30 p.m. on ESPN Pacific time. The precise kickoff time will be announced by next Monday. Friends, WeAreUSC.com's Inside the Trojans Huddle greatly appreciates your viewer and listenership. And we encourage those of you watching on sites like YouTube to click on the red subscriber and like button. It's greatly valued and it's free. And as a courtesy reminder for those of you that are not currently a subscriber member of WeAreUSC.com, there is a promotion going on right now that for $10 you can access all of WeAreUSC.com's premium stories, analysis, and videos. The current new member deal gives you complete coverage through this season and all the way up to August 31st, 2023. All right, let's kick it off here, panel. We kick off the first half with a review and grading for the Trojans' 41-35 victory over the pesky, I don't know if that's the right word for it, Cal Bears. First, a quick overview, no grades needed. Overall thoughts on the game. Our leadoff hitter, as always, Marc Kulkin. What do you think?
So my overall thoughts, I was concerned after watching USC on offense to start the game. I was even more concerned after USC's defense came on the field, giving up a touchdown to start the game. And then I was okay between, in the second and third quarters until the fourth quarter rolled around. It's hard to put my finger on the pulse of this team right now, because Lincoln Riley doesn't want to call them complacent. He says they're frustrated. I think it's somewhere in the middle. I don't think anyone anticipated this team turning around as quickly as they did and already having 8 wins. And I'm not sure the team has figured that out yet. To be up 34-14 going into the fourth quarter, and then to hang on against an offensive juggernaut. I hope everybody senses my sarcasm. At home, something's not right. And I understand players are missing, from injuries and so forth. But these are the same players who were very opportunistic on defense earlier in the year. And for whatever reason, they're not quite as opportunistic. So it was a rough game. I think there's some complacency setting in. And I don't know if Lincoln Riley agrees or disagrees, but all of a sudden, he's now picking and choosing who we get to talk to after football practice this week. So apparently there's some message that he wants to get across, and he only wants certain people getting that message across.
Good point. Steve Bisheff, your thoughts?
Yeah, I was not overly impressed by this performance. I thought Caleb Williams was tremendous. The receivers were good, considering the two starters were missing. But I think there's a red flag waving there when you allow a Cal team to hang in there and come back and actually threaten you in the fourth quarter. This is the same Cal team that lost to Colorado. That's hard to believe, really, that they could come in here and march up and down the field, because I think it just proves this defense is really bad, if not terrible. I think it's now threatening to be worse than last year's defense. And I think the one thing that's saving the team, I think overall, is it continues to be astounding that they've only turned the ball over once all season. I can never remember all the years I've watched college football, a team go this deep into the season with 1 turnover. And considering the team is full of transfers and portal guys, and I mean, it's an amazing achievement. I don't know how they're doing it, but they are. I think you have to credit the coaches somewhat. But imagine if they'd been turning it over regularly, you might have 3 or 4 losses at this point. So I think you have to credit that. I think this team should slowly build to the final 2 games, which are going to really define the season. The season's been a success as it is, because coming back from last year, they've done such a good job. But whether it's an overwhelming success will depend on the last 2 games.
Chris Arledge, your analysis.
I thought it was the most disappointing game of the season. I mean, after you had the tough loss at Utah, and I think all of us here realize that that we knew going in that was going to be a tough game against a good team in a difficult place to play. We had a couple of calls that may have made the difference in the game. So you can look at that game and be disappointed, but say, okay, one close loss on the road to a good team is not going to destroy your season. Then they go to Arizona, who is not a good football team at all. But they do have a good quarterback, and they have some good wide receivers. And so you say, okay, well, that was ugly. It was disappointing. But, that quarterback is tough to corral. And, you have receivers making circus catches. It's a freak thing. We'll get over it. But you expect after those 2 performances for the team to come out, especially defensively, and really curb stomp a Cal offense that's terrible. And they are terrible. For the defense to play that way was extraordinarily disappointing. And I know people are going to hear that and they're going to whine, because there's a certain number of USC fans that think that in order to be a good fan, you have to cheer no matter what you're watching. Look, it's not true, as people say, that a win is a win. It is true that you'll never destroy a season with an ugly win. That's true. There are losses that can destroy a season. An ugly win will never destroy a season. But it's not true that a win is a win, because if you're playing poorly, and if you're playing poorly consistently, those ugly losses, those ugly wins will turn into losses. They will. That's the way this game works. And we had this debate for years in those seasons where Clay Helton would pull out 2, 3, 4 ugly wins in a row, right? Penalty field, undisciplined pieces of junk. And they'd find a way to beat a less talented team. And people would say, a win's a win. But you knew ultimately that the bad play was going to turn into losses. That's what happens when you're playing badly, especially when you run into a better team. They're not going to run into a better team this week. Colorado may be the worst major college team in the country, but they're going to run into some pretty good teams soon, and they better get it together. That was a lousy and frankly embarrassing performance by the defense. The offense, I was very critical after the Arizona State game because I thought in the first half the defense played about as poorly as you can see them play, but they turned it around in the second half and played pretty well. This time it was in the fourth quarter where they absolutely collapsed against a bad football team. I'm worried about it. I'm worried about what I saw. And I think that the offense is probably going to have to score 50, 60 points in the coming weeks if they want to pull out wins. And you never want to be in that position. So that was longer winded than I thought, but I'm a little bit disturbed. So I got worked up.
Well, this is also a therapy session. It feels good for all of us. I will just say I echo what you said, Chris. I thought it was the most disappointing time of the season of all the games played. It was so frustrating to watch a defense that really, if I close my eyes, I'd wonder whether Todd Orlando was in charge of it. That's not to be a rip on Alex Grinch at the moment, but really, they play with no confidence. Their alignments are completely befuddling to me. I can see it from in the press box, just where the stuff is wide open on how Cal's going to attack them. They're playing like chickens with their heads cut off. There's no unity in it. I'm going to kind of reserve a little bit of excitement saying all teams hit the wall somewhere in the season. And SC is very fortunate that the wall they're hitting is against Cal. And we'll see what happens. I think they'll come out against Colorado and play. But their moment, their Armageddon, their whatever you want to call it, is one game away against UCLA and then Notre Dame. So there's a lot to be concerned about, no question about it. So let's panel, let's now give out specific grades for each individual offensive unit. Brief comment. Again, you're grading on quarterback, running backs, wide receiver, tight ends, offensive line. Mark, go ahead and give us your grades.
Yeah, we'll start, with Caleb. I dropped him down a little bit. I gave him an A-. He had good numbers. 26 for 41, 40 yards, 60 yards, whatever that number is, 4 touchdowns through the air, 1 on the ground. But he looked off. He needs to find a second pitch in his repertoire, so to speak. Everything he throws seems to be a fastball, especially when he's under duress. And I would still like to see him just make a little bit quicker decision making. I know he's looking downfield. He's trying to keep the play alive, but just extend the drive. And if that means picking up 5 to 7 yards on the ground, I don't think anybody's going to complain about that. Or just take what's underneath, take your release valve, use that guy. The running backs, that's a tough grade, but Travis Dye, he literally raises the group. I'm giving them a B. They were nothing spectacular. That was his 8th game in a row where he scored a touchdown. That's, the first time that's happened at USC since Marcus Allen, believe it or not. I just read that stat that came out, and I'm thinking about, who USC's had recently with, Reggie Bush, Lundell White, and so on and so on. But to find out that Travis Dye is the first guy since Marcus Allen to score a rushing touchdown in 8 straight games, my eyebrow went up a little bit. But we're not getting anything from anybody else. Austin Jones, Rayleigh Brown, nothing. And part of that, though, I think you have to lay at the feet for the play calling. I don't know if we're running the ball enough. You had 155 yards as a team, and you're getting over 5 yards per attempt. run the ball a little bit more. Wide receivers and tight ends, I'm going to go B. Too many drops again, but they are stepping up in the absence of Mario Williams and Jordan Addison. Once again, Taj Washington backed up his play, another 100-yard game. He led the team to 7 receptions. Michael Jackson III, Mike Jack, MJ3, you guys can pick out his favorite nickname. He led the team in yards with 115 yards. He had a nice end-around reverse that maybe if he followed Caleb Williams' block a little bit better, he runs in for a touchdown. And the tight ends were targeted twice. They both caught the ball fallow. Lake McCree had a touchdown on his catch. So again, I thought those guys were solid. And then as far as the offensive line, I'm going to grade up again. I'm giving them an A. And when you have no sacks, no holding penalties, you're doing exceptionally well with your run blocking. And when the team has 5 penalties, and 2 of them are attributed to the O-line, one was a false start, the first play of the game. The other one was an illegal shift, the first play of the 3rd quarter. Coincidence? I don't know why that happened at the start of the 1st and the 3rd, but to me, those plays didn't really have any impact on the game at that point. Obviously USC didn't start off the well offensively, but Mason Murphy, last week started at right tackle, played the entire game. This week he starts at left tackle. Has the future arrived at left tackle already? I mean, I know Cortland Ford was healthy. He was ready to play. I know Bobby Haskins wasn't healthy or ready to play. To take the guy all the way from the right side to the left side and make that happen and play as well as he did. That group's getting an A from me. So yeah.
Okay.
There's your position groups.
Thank you. Steve Bisheff?
Yeah, I give Caleb an A-. Wasn't his best game, but he's the reason they won the game. He's he kept them going. He kept leading drives and making escapes and getting key first downs and touchdowns. I just think he's playing great. I consider him definitely in the Heisman conversation. I think the running backs were good. I'd give them a B. Also, I think they need more opportunity. I think Travis Dye needs more opportunity. I think if you run more, you're going to take some pressure off Caleb, and you're going to balance the offense more. You don't want to be throwing it 35, 40 times if you don't have to. And I don't think they have to. I think the running game is good enough, and Dye is good enough that he should be utilized. He should be gaining over 100 yards every game. He's that good. I thought you have to give the receivers a B+ considering the 2 starters weren't there. I thought both Jackson and Washington played terrific under the circumstances. And the offensive line, I'd give a B+, A-. I thought they played very well. No penalties. Blocking well for the run. They allowed maybe some more pressure on Caleb than you'd like, but that's going to happen, especially when Caleb is that much of a factor. So I think the offense in general played certainly well enough to win, which is why they won.
All right, Chris, your grades, please.
Yeah, I think the offense played all right. That offense is so talented that against lower level teams like Cal, they can score on any drive where they don't make a mistake. That's the reality. And fortunately, we haven't had a lot of mistakes in the form of turnovers. We do have mistakes where dropped passes. We have mistakes where we throw low percentage passes where we probably shouldn't. This is the one area where I'll ding Caleb Williams. I'll give him a B+. It would, for almost any other quarterback, it would be an A, but he didn't play as well as he could because he's amazing and he played slightly less than amazing. I think that we have far too many low percentage throws downfield to guys that are covered. And we end up playing behind the sticks, 2nd and 10, 3rd and long. We have quite a few third and long plays where we throw 50-yard fades to a receiver that has a guy running with him step for step. And if we would just take the easier throw or just break contain and pick up 8 yards on the ground, then USC would go from scoring in the low 40s to the low 50s every game. And I think that needs to change. Not for this Friday, but it's probably going to need to change for the week after that when USC needs to score 52 points. So I thought Caleb Williams played well, but for Caleb Williams, it was a so-so effort. Running backs, they don't get enough touches. USC is 7th in the country in yards per rush attempt. And USC decided to come out in an open set for most of the first half, spread 5 wide. The running backs had 18 total carries in that game, despite the fact that USC could run the ball on Cal anytime they wanted to. I don't understand that. I know Lincoln Riley is a great offensive coach. I don't doubt for a second that he had a plan that would allow the offense to attack Cal with 5 wide receivers. I know all that. I just wonder why we're getting away from the running game when we don't have to. USC should be running for 250 yards a game. And if they did, then Caleb Williams' numbers wouldn't look as good, but it would take a lot of pressure, I think, off of both the offense and the defense if we did that. The running backs, the running backs were Travis Dye, who's always good, and then the other 2 backs who got a total of 3 carries. I don't know what grade to give guys that got 3 touches. So I'll just say the running backs played well, A-. Wide receivers, tight ends. Look, again, you're without your top 2 targets. Those guys were productive again. We do have some drives ending because of drops, and that happens just about every week. And I know you're going to see that, but it happens too much, and it happened again. It happened again this past Saturday, and so I'll give those guys a B+. They played well, and they're going to get better because those guys haven't been playing a ton. Offensive line grade, I'll give them an A- also. Caleb didn't get sacked. Now, granted, it's Caleb Williams, and sacking Caleb Williams is a really difficult thing to do, even if you come in unblocked. But they didn't give up a sack. They ran the ball well when Riley decided to run it. I think all those guys played pretty well. None of them played great. I thought they were a little lackadaisical at times. I thought there were drives, especially in the first half, that should have been touchdowns that weren't, because the guys simply weren't making plays that they should make, or they were making decisions that they shouldn't make. But it was a decent performance against a not very good football team.
Okay, well, I'm going to be quick. I gave Caleb an A-. I thought he did well. I would have liked to have seen him actually run the ball a little bit more rather than heave it downfield, but that's being picky about it. Running backs, it really should be running back. I mean, Travis Dye was a B+. He should have gotten the ball more in the first quarter. They came out throwing. They can justify why they did it. But I've noticed that when SC doesn't come out and score in the first 20, 25 plays, they tend to hit a lull. And that was obviously something that reminded me of the previous administration, that if once you got done with the scripted plays, then the chess matches begin. But, they should be running the ball more, and it would take pressure off the defense. I mean, how many times does the defense have to come onto the field? It's a tightrope balance. I understand that. Wide receiver, tight ends, I went with a B+. I probably could have given him an A-. I thought Michael Jackson was just tremendous. Offensive line grade, I gave him a B+. I thought the biggest takeaway from was Mason Murphy. I think he's going to be a great fixture from here on out. I will be surprised if he isn't starting the rest of the way. So good for him. Panel, what overall grade would you give the offense? Just simply the grade, Mark?
B.
Steve?
A-.
Chris?
B+.
And I give it a B+ as well. All right, let's turn our attention to defense and give out specific grades for each individual defensive unit and a brief comment. Let's get right to it. We'll go with defensive line, linebackers, and secondary. Mark, your thoughts, grade and thoughts.
Yeah, we're just going straight to the groups.
Just straight to the groups right now.
Outstanding. Defensive line, rush ends. Man, I told everybody I was going to be a little harsh with the defense today, so I'm just going to stick with it. I'm giving them a C. We're not getting enough production from that group, plain and simple. Unless you've got Thule or Nick Figueroa playing defensive end or rush end, they're just not applying enough pressure to that quarterback or getting in the backfield enough. It's that simple. Thule got a couple more sacks. I think you said it, Greg. He now leads the nation with 9 or whatever the number is.
Correct.
So NFL draft, here we come. Hopefully USC is still in the playoff hunt. Otherwise, if I'm advising Thule at the end of the year, I'm saying you got to get ready for the draft and go get paid. Hopefully that doesn't upset too many people, but his talent is going to be more important than settling for a lower tier bowl game. As far as Solomon Byrd, he's out there. He's trying, but we're getting no production from him. And Corey Foreman we've seen what we're getting from him all season. So that defensive line, rush end, just not a lot going on there. Dejon Benton had one great play to start the game, tackle for loss, and then that was it. Brandon Peely, he's giving great effort, but you hear the coaches talk about being close. That's all they're getting right now. They're getting close and they're not tackling well. The linebackers, man, C-. Right before we started, and I'm being a little generous here with that C-. The tackling is just really bad across the board at every position group. But when I was looking at the stats, I saw Shane Lee with 7 tackles. I know Tuasivi Nomura started the game at linebacker, but I could not find a single stat for him. Not a tackle, not an assist, nothing. I thought that would be impossible playing linebacker in football, to not have a tackle in a game by accident. Someone falling on top of you. But that's what we got from that group this week. And the secondary, another C-, and that's only because Kalen Bullock was able to get an interception out of that group. But you had 3 pass interferences from the secondary. A lot of poor tackling. You saw Sierra Wright get replaced late in the game, and they had to go with Jacoby Covington. They didn't even go after Mekhi Blackman because they knew they only had to attack one side of the field. So that's a big red flag right now with that secondary. And I don't know if we're going to learn a lot. I think Chris brought this up earlier. I don't think we're going to learn a lot playing Colorado this week. So, yeah, not a strong performance from the defense, however you slice it.
All right, Steve Bisheff.
Yeah, I think we're going to be pretty much unanimous on most of these. The defensive line, obviously, Thule had 2 sacks, but you take away him and maybe it's an F on the defensive line. As it is, I'd give it a D. I'd give the linebackers a D. Where were they? I don't understand some of the alignments, as you said earlier. You're dropping Figueroa and Thule back sometimes to do what? I don't know. Are they supposed to cover a 190-pound back coming out of the backfield? I don't think they can. What's the purpose? Defensive backfield, you had the 1 interception. I'd give that a D+. Overall, it was a miserable defensive performance.
All right, Chris, how miserable was it?
Pretty miserable. I'm going to give D's to every single position group. And look, here's the thing. Going into the 4th quarter, you have a 20-point lead at home against a lousy offensive football team. Cal is lousy offensively. Cal has had games where they scored 9 points. They lost to Colorado because they couldn't move the ball and score against Colorado, which made, like I said, Colorado may be the worst major college football team in the country. Cal is bad. They're bad. and you have a defense give up 3 consecutive scoring drives in the fourth quarter at a time when a single stop ends the game, and they couldn't do it. It was appalling. The one thing I'll give them is the run defense was better. Actually, the run defense has been getting better for a few weeks now. They did a pretty good job against Utah's running backs. I was worried about that. Arizona's backs didn't do a ton, and Cal's running game really never got started. So that's good. But the pass defense at this point is shockingly bad. There are 2 things going on, I think. One is Thule is a future NFL star. I think Nick Figueroa will make an NFL team. I think Eric Gentry will play in the NFL, though he hasn't been playing the last couple of weeks. But you get away from those 3 guys in the front 7, it's a roster of just guys. And I don't mean to be offensive, but that's what it is. It's a roster of just guys. There's nobody else who offensive coordinators have to worry about making plays in that front 7. There isn't. Shane Lee would have been a spectacular linebacker in 1964 because of the skill set he brings. And I love the guy. He's tough. He's a leader. He hits. He plays hard. But you know, when you spread things out, he's going to struggle a little bit. And Shane Lee is one of the bright spots in the defense right now. The rush in position is supposed to be a big time position in this defense. That's supposed to be a guy who you cannot block one-on-one. And essentially USC is playing with 10 guys because they don't have anybody that they're taking defensive tackles and sticking them out at rush in, where they sometimes have to drop into coverage in these zone blitzes. And they're doing that because they literally don't have a guy at that position who can make plays. Corey Foreman cannot make plays. The next time Corey Foreman beats a guy one-on-one to make a play will be the first. He can't play. And I'm sorry, I know that people are going to be upset about that, but that's the reality. When you get a guy who's supposed to be the #1 overall defensive recruit in the country, and he's an edge guy, you're expecting Clay Matthews. They didn't get Clay Matthews. They got a guy who is just as likely to beat an offensive tackle one-on-one as Clay Aiken. That's offensive, but it's true. So up front, they don't have much talent, and they're getting and even against mediocre teams like Cal, they can't collapse the pocket. They can't make plays. They had 3 sacks, but that's below average against Cal this year. Cal has given up 3.3 sacks per game, and they're getting up sacks against teams that aren't any good. UNLV had 4 sacks against Cal. Notre Dame had 6. Notre Dame has a pretty good pass rush. Washington had 5. I mean, look, they had 3 sacks and they had 3 pressures in 52 offensive plays that resulted in a pass or a sack. 6 out of 52. So part of the problem is the secondary, which I'm going to get to. But part of the problem is our guys up front are too easy to block. And it's not like Jack Plummer's Jake Plummer. He's not running around making plays with his feet. He doesn't run any better than I do. And then in the secondary is a giant grease fire right now. And I don't think it's a lack of talent. I think at the defensive line and linebackers positions, USC has had a lot of misses in recruiting over the last 2 years. And so you look at the roster and you say, okay, there's not a lot of high-level talent in the front 7. That's not true in the secondary. In the secondary, that's the one place where the defensive recruiting has been actually quite good. And those guys have no idea what they're doing, right? You have a guy bite on the pump fake, and let a receiver run by him for a touchdown when nobody's within 20 yards of him. You have another corner bite on the out and up, guys wide open, touchdown. You have a bunch of guys who are giving clean releases off the line of scrimmage when they're up on the receiver and you have to get a hand on them, and they're not doing it. You have a bunch of guys who are running downfield with receivers, not looking back for the ball. Why are they not looking back for the ball? Usually it's because they're beat. And if you're a secondary guy and your receiver has a step or 2 on you, if you turn around to look for the ball, there's going to be increased separation, number 1. And number 2, if the pass does get there, you're probably not going to make the tackle. And so if you're not in a good position, it's hard to look back for the ball. And so we have a lot of defensive backs that are running downfield, not looking back for the ball because they're not in great position and not contesting throws. It is a disaster right now. And I know people don't want to hear that, but listen to Alex Grinch after that game. Go watch his interview. He knows it's a disaster. He said he wanted to throw up with some of the stuff he's seen. Okay, well, he's not alone. I'm not saying any coach should be fired. I'm not saying any of that stuff. I'm just saying if you watch that defense play in the second half against a really bad football team in a game where the defense had already played bad 2 consecutive weeks and really should have been in a position where they're breathing fire and trying to make a statement. If you watch that team play in that situation and play like that, I don't know how you could be anything other than really concerned about the last 2 games of the year.
All right. Here's how I see it. Defensive line and rush, D. Linebacker grade, D. Secondary grade, D. I agree with Alex Grinch. I wouldn't go as far to say I wanted to vomit over it, but I would say that from my perspective that I was watching it from, why Tui Peloto, who's top in the country with sacks, is out there guarding grass. He's 7 yards back. The quarterback's in shotgun formation. That's 14 yards split. I know that they, don't want to give up big plays, but at some point you really have to just get it right at the mesh point. You have to go after it. So, excuse me. So we'll see. Not real promising at the moment. Not what's coming, and we know what's coming. So overall grade. Quickly, just the grade. Mark.
C-.
Steve.
D-.
Chris.
D-.
And I give it a D- as well. All right, now give me your overall grade and a brief comment on the Trojans special teams, should we say? Okay, Mark.
D.
Okay, any comment on why?
Yeah, well, I thought about this, and I'm not even sure a full-time special teams coach is going to make a difference this year, especially when you consider the coaches that work with the specific groups. So if you want to focus on kick return, well, Kyle McDonald works with the kick returners. Okay, Rayleigh Brown is your #1 kick returner. If he doesn't have the opportunity to communicate the right message on how to do the job between running back group as well as special teams, what more is a full-time special teams coach going to do? I know the same comment applies to the punt return. Luke Heward, he works with the wide receivers. Your wide receivers are typically your punt returners. So again, if it's getting the message across to do better, I agree with Lincoln Riley from that approach of how he's delegated. Now, will a full-time special teams coach make a difference when it comes to onside kick recovery? Again, Luke Heward works with the wide receivers. It was Brendan Rice and Kyron Hudson who were, I'll just say, they were confused on that first onside kick when the ball approached them. Nobody went to recover the ball. So I'm just going to go with a D. They haven't affected the outcome of a game yet, but it's getting close. It's getting close.
Steve?
Yeah, I'd give it a C- or D+. They didn't do anything terrible, but that onside kick was almost it could have been a deciding thing if Caleb hadn't bounced back and got some points again. But that was a big turning point in whether the game was going to be a runaway or whether it was going to be close. And the recovery there, it just wasn't played very well. And I don't see anything terrible about the other parts of the game, but nothing stands out either.
Chris?
Yeah, D+ maybe. Missed extra points can cost you football games, especially when you're playing against a good football team, which they weren't. But they still won by 6, so it could have been a problem. Obviously, the onside kick was potentially a gigantic issue. I think that we're getting very little out of the kick return unit. The kickoff kickoffs this week were something of a disappointment. A lot of short, low kicks. I didn't see anything in the special teams to be excited about. I know I'm a huge grouch tonight. I listen to myself talk, and it sounds like I'm just complaining about everything. But I got to tell you, there was a lot to complain about that week. So I feel a little bad, but not that bad. I'll give him a D plus C minus.
All right, I'm going to go with a D. Anytime you snap the ball over the holder's head, the kicker's head, on an extra point in the beginning of the game, the onside kick thing is going to be an issue. You can be sure SC will be seeing that in the future. Like I said, I gave it a D. Let's go overall team grade for the win, and it's a win is a win at Cal. Marc, grade.
When I come across a B and a D, that averages out to a C.
Okay, Steve,
C minus.
Chris.
It was a D. I was disappointed, and the team has to get a lot better in a hurry.
I'm going with a D plus, only because the defense was so horrible that it distracts from. Hey, if Cal won that game, I'm sure there wouldn't be any. Should I give him a D plus or a C minus? Probably a lot would be vented, should we say? And the final thing we want to talk about here is what grade would you give the officiating? Because we always have to. That's got to be a part of the equation in the Pac-12 conference. What grade did you give the officiating, Marc?
Actually, I graded them high this week. I gave them a B because they weren't really involved, and I think that USC got a gift. They didn't call that running into the punter, which kind of we all looked at each other up in the press boxes like, really, we got away with that one. So kudos to you, Pac-12 clowns. You get a B this week.
Wow. Okay, Steve.
I'd give it a B also. I didn't see any stark comparisons to some of the other terrible games they've called all year long. I thought it was a relatively clean job by them, and that's shocking, but give them credit for once. I thought it was a B.
Chris?
Yeah, B also. They didn't do anything shockingly dumb, and they didn't affect the outcome of the game. What more can you ask for?
Exactly.
I gave them a B. I think any sport where the official, the umpire, the referees, it's like they're not even out there, is generally a good sign. So I gave them a B. So with that in mind, we're going to expand just a little bit here in the second quarter on SC and the defense. It's such a topic of conversation everywhere. Is this SC defense unfixable after 9 games? How will that affect upcoming games against Colorado, at UCLA, and Notre Dame? What would you do if you were in Alex Grinch's shoes? Chris, we'll start off with you. What would you do?
So is the defense unfixable? I don't know. I think that my biggest concern is not Colorado. It would be nice to completely shut them down, but Colorado's going to give up 50 points. So my biggest concern is UCLA, and because UCLA can do so much offensively to hurt you. And what I think I would do is, number one, I'd pray that Eric Gentry comes back, because if he doesn't come back, I don't know how they're going to get any stops against the Bruins. Number two, I think you've got to figure out, if you have 4 guys or 5 guys, the way this secondary is set up, if you have 5 guys in the secondary who can play and stick with them, they're moving a lot of guys in. I don't know that it's helped them at all. The reality is that USC is going to get stops because of sacks, penalties, or turnovers. That's it. They are not going to slow down UCLA's offense. They're either going to knock some balls loose, or they're going to give up long drives from touchdowns almost every time. That's the reality. That was true even early in the year against offenses that weren't nearly as good as UCLA. The defense has success when they knock the ball loose. And at this point, they're not getting hands on the ball in the passing game. So what would I do? What I would do is I would bring pressure, and I would take the defensive backs, who I think are less likely to make egregiously stupid errors. I'd stick them back there and I'd pray. And I would know that against UCLA, you're going to give up a lot of yards and a lot of points. But if you can get some sacks, if you can knock a ball loose, if you can get a pick or two against a quarterback, by the way, as talented as he is, who is something of a head case when things get tough, if you can do that, you can win the game. And so that's what I would do. I would go super aggressive. If they sit back in a soft zone and just let UCLA do whatever they want, that game's over. Notre Dame, I actually feel a little bit better about. I think that Mayer, the tight end, will probably catch 180 passes. But at the same time, Notre Dame's quarterback is questionable. Their wide receivers are mediocre. Notre Dame just wants to line up and pound the ball. And I actually think that plays into USC's strengths more than these spread offenses do. I think they can have some success slowing down the Notre Dame offense. But that's what I do with UCLA, and then just pray.
When all else fails, pray. All right, Mark, are you going to be doing a lot of praying?
Sure, why not? I'm told I'm on my knees quite a bit anyway. So, look, Chris, I think he nailed it pretty well. Just be aggressive. We didn't see that against Cal. We didn't see a whole lot of blitzing. And that's because I think the concern was, covering everybody that was coming out, running routes. Was USC prepared for Cal to, to throw 4 and 5 wide receiver routes out there? I don't know. We don't get to watch a whole lot of practice, and that time's getting cut even more. So I agree with Chris. Just put your cornerbacks on an island, get after the quarterback, get in the backfield as often as possible, because Colorado doesn't scare me offensively. DTR from UCLA, Dorian Thompson-Robinson, when he is under pressure, he is a turnover waiting to happen. But you have to get a hand on him. And that's an issue. I don't know if USC has enough team speed on defense in that front 7 to make that happen. So they're going to have to use their secondary. They're going to have to use their safeties to make that happen. And again, against Notre Dame, they don't want to throw the ball. And so that could be a benefit to USC, but you're always going to get everybody punching up when they play USC. And when you see a 9-1 USC coming out of Colorado, UCLA is going to be coming ready to play in 2 weeks. And we know Notre Dame will be out here. They just jumped into the top 20 as well. I don't know if it's fixable. You do need to get Eric Gentry back. You need to get healthy. You need to get Raylan Goldforth back healthier. They add some depth. They make plays when they're out there. And you got to make some hard decisions at cornerback right now. Damani Jackson, I don't know if you're going to be able to play him this year. He's been hurt. So if you're going to run with Sia Wright, if you're going to run with Mekhi Blackman as your starters and Jacoby Covington, you better be prepared to move some other guys in there, because right now tackling is horrible. And you can't count on Kalen Bullock making an interception every week. Somebody else has to step up. Bryson Shaw led the team in tackles last week with 11. You don't want your guys. I don't think you want the guys in the secondary leading the team in tackles.
That's a bad sign.
Yeah. Usually.
Steve, your thoughts?
I was going to bring up an issue that not only stands for now, but the future. How involved is Lincoln Riley in the defense? It worries me because I see signs of the Lane Kiffin, Steve Sarkisian, all offense, all that matters syndrome. I try to watch Riley some on the sideline. I very rarely see him interacting with defensive players or coaches. He's busy plotting his offense, thinking ahead. I know he's obviously a great offensive coach, but if you're a head coach of a team that's going to contend for a national championship at some point, I think you have to have more involvement with the defense. And I think that's a question that goes back to his Oklahoma days, where people wondered about that there. Oklahoma had great success, but a lot of those scores were 45-35 and 48-40, and his defenses were not good there. And in his first season here, it's not good. You know, he recruited and went in the portal to get mostly skilled guys on offense. They've done that. They've done a terrific job of that. You hope in the future he's going to recruit more 4- and 5-star guys on defense. And that, I think that could help tremendously. But I still think I'd like to see more involvement by the head coach as far as defense is concerned. And I think that's been part of the problem.
All right, I'll conclude the second quarter by saying, is it unfixable? I'd say in its current state, it's unfixable. I think that Grinch, by his own admission, is trying everything, every combination. Players are coming in, players are going out. What they can fix is brought up by some of you already, is getting Gentry back and Goforth back. That will be an immediate upgrade from maybe horrendous to, workable. I do think that attitude plays a lot in it. I don't think their minds have been on it defensively. This was the first game that I thought they weren't really into it emotionally, and they have to play with emotion. I suspect that when they play at the Rose Bowl, UCLA, it appears it's going to be a sellout, a night game. If you can't get fired up for that, then you can't get fired up for anything. So, this is a big problem. We're into the 10th game of the season. It'll be the 11th when they play UCLA. How much can be fixed after you've just watched the previous 10 games after Friday? It's a real roll of the dice. And if they can get those two guys back, maybe it won't be as bad as it currently actually is. So with that, let's go to our halftime, close out the show with viewer questions and panel answers. Again, those of you that have questions, go to the WeAreUSC.com message boards. You'll see something from me that says we got a question asked. So we're going to immediately go to question 1 from Santa Clarita. It's directed at Marc Kulkin. This was the specific. The question is directed at Marc Kulkin. I know the coaching staff is tight-lipped about injuries. Press is banned from most of the practices. Since it's become all too obvious that losing Eric Gentry has been a monumental loss for the defense. Any insight on his possible availability for the UCLA game? Without him, our chances look dim. Mark, address
I would anticipate Eric playing in the UCLA game. Do they need him against Colorado? Absolutely not. Should he play a little bit if available? Absolutely. I think you got to work some of that rust off and kind of just get in a little bit more football shape just to see what you look like out there in live action. But anticipate seeing him in the UCLA game. There's no way they're going to play that game without him. I have zero doubt about that.
All right, let's go to question 2. Scott from Gilbert, Arizona. Panel, do you feel that we relied way too much on the empty set and the passing game versus running the ball and shortening the game in order to help with our injury issues? Comment, panel, jump right in.
Yes.
Yeah, I mentioned that already. I didn't like so much empty set in the first half. I'm not so worried about shortening the game. The thing is, what the running game does is an effective running game really demoralizes the defense, number one. There is nothing worse than people running off tackle. You pull those offensive linemen, you run off tackle, you pick up 8-9 yards of play. That is demoralizing for a defense. And what it also does is it means that you're going to have to start bringing additional people into the box. And when you bring additional people into the box against USC, that means that you have secondary guys that don't have help against elite athletes running downfield. So yeah, I didn't like it. I know, look, I'm not criticizing Lincoln Riley as an offensive coach. He knows more than I do. I thought it was a questionable tactic, and I'm not sure why we did it.
You also keep the defense off the field more.
Yeah.
If you have longer drives and you eat up clock, your defense isn't a strength. You want it off the field as much as you can and keep it fresh. I remember covering a San Diego Charger team that had the best offense in the league with Dan Fouts and Kellen Winslow and Charlie Joyner and company, and they scored too quick. A lot of times they scored on 2, 3, 4 play drives, and the defense kept coming out. And not only was the defense bad, but by the fourth quarter, it was worn out. So you really try not to have that happen. And running the ball is a good reason to help prevent that from happening.
All right, question 3 from SC, the one in the OC. Kind of two-part question here, so pick whatever one you want. Panel, who should be starting safeties and starting nickelback, and why do we take our best edge rushers, Thule and Nick Fig, drop them into coverage at times? It was not good for Drake Jackson, and I don't think it is good for us now. Your thoughts? What do you think, panel?
I'm going to answer the second part of that.
Right ahead.
Says our best edge rushers, Thule and Nick Fig. Those guys aren't edge rushers. They're defensive tackles. The reason they're edge rushers is because USC doesn't have an edge rusher on the roster. And Grinch is desperate to find somebody who can beat an offensive tackle. That's the reality. Those guys are defensive tackles. Now, so you say, why drop them into coverage at times? Because one of the strengths of running a 3-4 type of defense is that you can bring lots of different rushers from lots of different spots, and the quarterback doesn't always know where they're coming from. It's one of the reasons why you run a defense like this. And so that's going to be part of the plan. If you have edge rushers who are not edge rushers, but are in fact 295-pound defensive tackles, then what the defense is going, then when you drop them back in these zone blitz defenses, you're going to have them doing something that they're not fit to do. Why are they doing it? Because those guys aren't edge rushers and they shouldn't be playing that position. But Grinch doesn't know what else to do. That's why it's happening. So what can he do? He can bring those guys consistently, and probably should. But Grinch also knows that takes away one of the strengths of our defense, which is the versatility, because you're not supposed to know where the extra rusher is coming from. Now you know exactly where the extra rusher is coming from, because it's the big dude who's a defensive tackle who's lined up outside. And so that's the problem he has, and that's why he's in the situation he's in. So it's frustrating to watch, but I get it. I get it.
As far as the safeties, you definitely want Kalen Bullock out there. You definitely want Max Williams out there. I'm starting to lean Bryson Shaw just because of how aggressive he is, particularly in run support. Not to take anything away from Jalen Smith, but the last thing I've got in my mind right now was that second touchdown that USC gave up against Cal. And I know Kalen Bullock looks like he was responsible for it, but between he and Jalen Smith and Max Williams, there was a breakdown out there. All I know is I need Kalen and Max on the field. Max he plays bigger than his size. Kalen will get he'll get a hand on the ball every game, but they got to get that third safety position figured out. Whether it's Bryson, whether it's Jalen Smith, they just got to get a little more out of that spot.
All right, let's jump to question 4. I don't even know if we can answer this, but I'll throw it out there anyway. It's from Big Trojan in the City of Angels. What exactly did DC Alex Grinch say to Bullock coming off the field? Reference, Cal's third TD of the game happened on a Trojans defensive breakdown when Maven Anderson from Cal is wondering why he's standing by himself all alone downfield while 3 USC defenders are looking at each other, deciding on who should take the responsibility. When the USC defense comes off the field, Alex Grinch has some words for Kalen Bullock, who was in coverage with Max Williams and Jalen Smith. Any inside information that we might glean from this?
He's the team captain back there. That's all I can assume.
Well, look, he bit on the pump fake on the bubble screen, right? And he comes flying upfield, and the guy gets behind him. That's not what you want your safety to do. I don't know exactly what Grinch told him, but I know he told him, you can't do that, right? You can't do that. And he can't. I mean, Kalen Bullock is a fantastic football player, but that was a pretty significant mistake. So you're going to get yelled at when you do that.
All right, from Danny Boy in Buena Park, Cali. What is going on with Rajon Davis? I heard Lincoln say he was on the cusp of playing, that he's almost right there, and we hardly see him. It's on special teams. What's going on? Any comments?
Your guess is as good as ours. We were assuming the same thing. When you hear Lincoln start pumping up a player, you think, all right, he's going to start getting some run on the field. It's not like he can do any worse than any of the other linebackers that are out there right now. So who knows?
I have a special affinity for coaches that say what they're going to do and then it doesn't happen. I think it's incredibly destructive to the player. I think it's incredibly destructive to credibility. There's maybe more than I know, obviously, but to see Lincoln Riley, and I saw it, say that he's right there, he's going to play, and this is maybe the week with the linebackers are down. And then I don't think he took more than one snap that I was aware of in the game. We didn't even see him. So that's a real head scratcher right there. I don't know what's going on, but I'm not going to make a prediction on what Davis is going to do after the season, but it's just something to keep an eye on.
I don't know what's going on with Davis, but you've got two linebackers down and you have a linebacker who started who didn't make a play the whole game.
Yeah,
He still doesn't play. That tells you something. And I don't know what it tells you. It either tells you that the coaches don't think Davis can play, or it tells you they don't like his effort in practice. I mean, I don't know, but it's strange that he's not getting a look when things are going so badly at that spot.
You know, I didn't have so much of a problem him not getting a look, so to speak. I had a problem with saying that he's right there, ready to play. Here it is. Linebackers are down, and nothing happens. It's a head scratcher. Quick question from Terrence in Carson, California. What has happened to the great prep running backs in SoCal? Has the talent dried up, and do we have to recruit in Texas? I don't think we're seeing some of the great running. The last really great running back I saw from this area was probably Najee Harris, who ends up going to Alabama, which was actually a sign of where we are prior to Lincoln coming to Southern California. But there hasn't really been a real superstar other than Harris that I'm aware of.
The young kid from Notre Dame will probably be that in a couple of years. That's a big kid that can run.
You got that young man down there in San Diego, Lincoln, Roderick Robinson, but I think he's going to the SEC somewhere.
Yeah, I think
he reneged his commitment from UCLA, right?
Yeah,
that's right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right. Let's get ready to end this thing. I think we answered this from Gerald and Fresno. Are you concerned about Lincoln Riley's track record for defenses in his programs? I was reading about some of his past defenses at Oklahoma. It makes me very concerned. I don't think anybody's more concerned than Lincoln Riley probably is at this point. So it'll be interesting to see, as Steve mentioned, just what he's going to do in the last 3 games and in the offseason. Be very, very interesting. And we'll take the last question from Nigel in Oceanside, California. As of today, panel, give me a point spread for the UCLA and Notre Dame games. If we lose to Colorado, in my opinion, we should just cancel the rest of the season. Well, that's pretty dramatic. So, panel, you have an early UCLA point spread?
I would think UCLA by 4.
I was gonna put a hook on that, say 4.5.
Yeah, I don't know what Vegas is going to say. That's a pick'em game. For all this talk about how USC's defense is lousy, go look at the numbers. UCLA's defense is lousy too. Both teams have excellent offenses, and neither team can be trusted to stop anybody. That's good. First one to 55 wins. Notre Dame, I don't know. Look, Notre Dame, I think USC is probably a slight favorite, but Notre Dame is pretty physical up front, and if they're getting some pressure on Caleb and stopping the running game, they actually might be able to slow down this USC offense a little bit. That worries me. Fortunately, Notre Dame doesn't have a very good offense, but
they're certainly a better team than we thought originally, Chris.
Well, they might be.
Well,
Clemson's they lost to Stanford only a few weeks ago, and Stanford is horrific.
I know.
Clemson has gigantic problems offensively. I thought Notre Dame might win the game. I think I called it. Are they better than they were early in the year? Yes. I still don't know that they're very good. We'll see. I mean, their next 2 we won't. Their next 2 games are against 2 nobodies, so they'll win both of them. But I don't know that Notre Dame has the athletes to compete with USC. We'll see.
I think UCLA game would have been Pick'em at the Coliseum, but I think the fact that it's at the Rose Bowl makes it a 3 or 4 point spread for UCLA.
I'm going to pick UCLA by 6 and USC by 6 against Notre Dame. So we'll find out. Again, if you have a question or comments for our panel, go to either the WeAreUSC message boards, click on the thread that pertains to Inside the Trojans Huddle. Viewer or listener questions. Folks, that will do it for Tuesday's first half edition of Inside the Trojans Huddle. Reminder that in the Thursday edition of the Huddle, we'll kick off the second half with a preview of the Colorado game and give our Pac-12 predictions for the upcoming weekend. So until Thursday, a big thank you again to our panelists, Marc Kulkin, Chris Arledge, Steve Bisheff. Good job, guys. And a special big thank you to all of you for watching or listening to Inside the Trojans Huddle. Hoping you have a great week wherever you may be. Go Trojans. And until Thursday, this is your moderator, Greg Katz, saying, fight on, everybody.